Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today the National Opposition presses the go button on holding the government to account. This is the largest opposition party that has ever been in the New Zealand Parliament. Has more New Zealanders who voted for it than for any other party in history, actually, but certainly more than have ever voted for an opposition party before. We find ourselves in Parliament with more seats than the governing coalition of Labour and New Zealand First. And we intend to use the size and depth of our seats in Parliament and our members of Parliament to hold the government to account. It's become apparent already that the National Opposition has a more aspirational and more positive view of the future of this country than the incoming government does. So we'll be keeping a very close eye on the impacts of its decisions on the economy, an economy which we learned just yesterday is generating the third highest employment rate in the world, third highest proportion of people at work, and has put in another surge in the creation of new jobs. So in the economy, the benchmark is high, and we will hold the government to that benchmark. There's a lot of work to do because the early signs are that they're quite happy making decisions which are going to make it harder for them to maintain that level of economic performance. The government's also raised a number of objectives and very high expectations with respect to its social objectives. We have in our team broad and deep understanding of what it really takes to change lives in New Zealand, and we'll be using that expertise to hold the government to account. They've illustrated already they're willing to spend lots of money with no focus on results for anyone in particular, simply to demonstrate their kindness and their values. We'll be setting a much higher benchmark than that. So as I put together the spokesperson's roles, we focused in the first instance on some continuity because we want to use the knowledge we have from what was an energised and focused government and carrying over quite a number of our spokespeople into similar roles simply on the belief that they know more and they certainly have much better policy than the new government does. We've been able to blend that with a number of our members from the last term coming through to more responsibility, and of course we have a significant intake of MPs who haven't been allocated spokesperson roles but will certainly be operating as part of the extensive team structure that we will use in opposition. So I'm very proud to make these announcements today because it really is the opportunity for the National Opposition to get busy, to match the government as it makes its announcements, but most particularly to keep faith with the large number of New Zealanders who voted for us, who feel frustrated about the way the government was formed, who want to maintain the positive direction that New Zealand's been going in, and as an opposition we're going to hold the government to account to maintain that positive direction.
Why has Judith Collins got such a significant promotion up the rankings? Was that your decision to promote her, or is it a caucus sort of vote that bumps her up the rankings so much?
Well, it's my decision. I mean, since she came back into the cabinet, she has performed very well in previous portfolios and in those that I allocated her when I became the Prime Minister. And so I think she will find, as certainly Phil Twyford will find, that her way of doing business suits opposition.
Can you take us through your thinking behind taking building and construction and the housing portfolios of Nick Smith and Amy Adams and giving them to Michael Woodhouse and Andrew Bailey?
Well, we wanted to move Amy Adams into workplace relations. It's probably one of the most concerning of the government's economic policies is a reversion to pre-1990 industrial relations models from New Zealand. I mean, this goes a good deal further than the Clark government in 2002. And Amy has both the intuitive understanding of how the workplace works in businesses, as well as a crystal clear legal mind. And this is going to be full of tricky, detailed issues.
Is it essentially a demotion for Nick Smith, taking building and housing off him? So why wouldn't he keep that?
Well, you just got to look at it. He did a great job in that area. I know he was criticised a lot, but you just need to see today and yesterday the highest building consent figures ever. The market now dropping in Auckland, and those figures that they use, those annual figures, it will drop for the next 12 months. So the prices are flat to falling, and as a measure of success in dealing with a vast amount of complexity, he did a great job. But he and I would both be of the view it's time to move to something else.
Do you think it'll last too?
Yes, I do.
You said he and
he can track the government on their plan to plant 1 billion trees, which don't exist, and no one knows where they're going to plant them.
You said he and I, so this is a decision that he came to as well.
Well, I've discussed all these issues with the MPs.
Here's a little interesting point. You didn't actually have a Minister of Housing in the last cabinet, did you?
Oh, look, I can't remember all the different labels that we use, but we have a spokesman on housing and social housing. We don't have to reflect government departments or regulatory frameworks. We can just give a label to an MP and they go off and do it. And it's a great opportunity for Mike Woodhouse.
Don't you see that my point is you took away a Minister of Housing because the Minister of Housing was under pressure, and then all of a sudden you go into opposition and you need a spokesperson on housing. It's just going on.
No, we had a number of ministers operating in housing before. I think you're over-reading whatever it is you're talking about. The fact is, I mean, we're here to market the government, not run the government agencies. They've got a Minister of Housing. He's already trying to count all the work that was in the pipeline as part of his 100,000 extra houses. They're already saying things like they're going to stop everyone else migrating except the people they need for the government's projects. But if you happen to be running a business in the regions where you can't get the migrants, they want them to be builders and policemen to fulfil the government promises. So it's a fair area that's wide open. Because actually the incoming Minister of Housing does not have a plan. The only way he can even partially succeed is to use the plan that National had in place.
You speak about your portfolios and promoting them and a number of MPs rise and like before. Are you sometimes testing them out and seeing how they go on those books?
Yes, and this is a deliberate approach here that we want the continuity of the knowledge that we have. Over time, in opposition, the demands are different. Different people will exceed or fall below expectations, and you would expect to see change later on when the process is shaken down, whether it's a bit clearer whether the government knows what it's doing. And in our party, all spokespeople have the chance to take initiative and show it and push it. And I have to say that's something the Parliament's not used to. The previous government was very poor in opposition, and it's going to show. It's already showing the decisions that they're making. We will just be a much more effective group in Parliament, and you should expect more tension more tension and more pressure in the Parliament, and particularly through the Select Committee process, because we are the dominant Select Committee party and we're not the government, and that is going to make a difference to how everything runs. It's not our job to make this place run for an incoming government that's a minority. Remember this, we are the opposition with a minority government. It's a term the media don't use, but you'll get to understand that it is a minority government with a majority opposition and the Greens as the support parties. And that's how we're going to run it.
Wouldn't that
What's the
sound
role
like
of the spokesperson for data?
What's that?
What's the role of the spokesperson for data?
It's a pretty critical role. A big part of their approach to social investment, combined with the advent of big data across the whole community, means that how information is handled is becoming one of the biggest public policy issues. And that was reflected in the some ongoing tension when we were the government around, MSD's use of individual level, client level data, the Data Futures Partnership, which I set up 2 or 3 years ago. So their job is to be part of the discussion about gaining the social license to use data to get much better results for people. Now, whether the government is interested in that, I don't know. They're thinking on social policies basically pre-internet. But we're going to be out there running a discussion that shows that you can use data powerfully to change lives, but we've got to get people to understand that and want it to happen because it's their data. And so Shane Retty, who is by any world standard an expert on, particularly with respect to health, will be leading that discussion.
Is it also like an Amy Adams? The significance of yesterday's statistics and what it means. Are you going to hold the government to account over that particular set of figures? So any rise in unemployment, you'll be able, is it like your ground zero?
Yes, it is. You've got to remember, these are parties who campaigned on the idea that capitalism has failed, and the economy was in a bad way, and everyone felt bad about it. It's simply not true. And that's why I say that we are the first opposition to have a more aspirational view for New Zealand than the government does. So if this is poor performance, then all they have to do is exceed it. And my guess is they're going to find that a bit more difficult than their rhetoric would indicate. But no, these are the benchmarks, and why not? Why not? Record building consents when housing was the biggest issue. They've got to do better than record. Job creation, record job creation. They've got to do better than record. And the rate at which they're setting out to kill off jobs in the film industry, for instance, tells you that they're not that focused on it.
Jacinda Ardern said that she wants to get unemployment below 4%. Do you think that's likely to happen?
If they all stayed in their offices, issued no press releases and got out of the way of the economy, it could happen. But actually, they're all out there saying all sorts of stuff that is upsetting confidence, making it very hard for people to know whether they can invest or employ next because they don't know what the rules are. For instance, the rules, a combination of the uncertainty around a new industrial relations regime, which almost no one running a business now has ever experienced, unless they started a business in 1987, or even before that actually, and throwing out the most progressive pay equity legislation in the world to replace it with something which they don't know what it is. Those two things will take at least 2 years to resolve properly. In the meantime, no one quite knows what the rules are or are going to be. That's just one example.
How many MPs do you expect to leave over the next term? Are you expecting a couple or more?
I wouldn't know. That's the individuals get to make those decisions. All I can say is I've been impressed by the enthusiasm of our MPs who have the choice to leave, to stay.
Has anyone signalled that they might be considering?
No.
Louise Upston came into the corrections portfolio not that long ago and had a bit of peace period. She's now moved out of that after not long ago in there. Is that, and you've got someone fresh again taken over, Simon O'Connor, is that reflective of Louise Upston not doing a good job, and what does that mean for stability of that portfolio when you get so much change?
It reflects the fact that we think Louise could do a great job with social welfare, because what we've got going on there is, well, just by way of a bit of background, all our ministers who've been in social related portfolios have a very good grasp of the social investment approach, which applies in a quite precise way in welfare. And so while she's been in corrections, she's been part of the collective effort to build a much better way of changing lives. And so she can take that to step it up into a larger scale in MSD. And that provides the opportunity then for Simon O'Connor, who's actually done work in prisons prior to coming into Parliament, to fill in there. So no, it's not a lack of stability. I think what you're going to find is a lack of stability is the government not knowing what it's going to do about the big pressure coming on the corrections portfolio and sort of randomly issuing decisions like getting rid of 3 strikes. You know, they take the one thing that is a deterrent to serious recidivist offenders that keeps them out of jail because they stop offending and gets rid of it, and then says it's going to reduce jail numbers. Well, then they'll just get overwhelmed by what's happening if they don't get smarter than that.
You've got an extra note.
Sorry?
You've got an extra note under Amy Adams saying that she'll be responsible for Pike River.
Yes.
Why has it taken 7 years and the Labor government creating a portfolio position specifically for Pike River for you to respond with the same sort of special?
Well, because who deals with it is not nearly as relevant as the complexity of trying to resolve that issue. When families have an understandable need to want to get in there, which we understand, and so far, under our law, you can't go into a workplace without someone being responsible for safety in that workplace. Right? There is no workplace for which there isn't someone responsible. And up to now, the people who have had that legal responsibility have decided it's not safe. Now, Mr. Little's saying that by March or April they'll be in there. Well, it's possible. He has to find an entity, people who are willing to take the heavy responsibilities now of workplace safety and somehow, without interfering, get them to make a decision that it's now safe to go in. Or he has to pass a law to exempt one of the most dangerous workplaces in the country from the law. And there may be a lot of people who think that that's a bit unfair given that their workplace is much less dangerous, but they're not exempted. So Ms Adams will have a sharp appreciation of those issues. Happy to help with solutions, but they have to be lawful solutions. That's been the only point we've argued on this. We're not opposed to the families going in, that something could be found there, that the whole thing was a hell of a tragedy. But we never agreed with the current political parties misleading those families that it was a political decision to go in. And now they are going to have to face the consequences of the political rhetoric they used and be answerable to the families. And it's going to be touch and go. I mean, are the Greens going to vote for a law that exempts the most dangerous workplace in New Zealand from our workplace safety law? Or is the government going to pick people to be on an entity to make a decision and not interfere with them under the threat of the law? Those people have to make their own decision because they are ultimately responsible for the courts for that decision. And of course responsible to the families of the next group of people who go in there.
Did you agree to some sort of mechanism for going into Pike River during the coalition negotiations with Mr. Peters and New Zealand First Party?
I don't discuss what we did in negotiations, our position, because that's a confidentiality agreement and I'm not going to breach it. Yes. And Mr. Peters made it very clear to us he wasn't going to breach it. So I know, look, over time there'll be a lot of questions about the negotiations. We signed an agreement, I'm bound by it, and I'm not going to breach it.
So you guys actually signed an agreement in there with them?
Yes.
Was it illegal?
You can be satisfied that the issues I've outlined are the key issues in Pike River, no matter what the politicians agreed to.
Yeah, but that's not to say that you would be prepared to create an entity like you've just described that wouldn't require, by the sounds of the way you were talking, wouldn't require a law change if they create an entity that has people that make that decision without political.
That's right.
That's possible, isn't it?
Yeah, that is possible. Yeah, and he may do it. He may be able to say we're going to have Pike River Limited, 4 or 5 people line up and say I really want people to go in there, and I'm willing to go along to court to say that I didn't properly assess the safety because actually I just wanted someone to go in there.
Yeah, but by the way you're describing it, which is actually quite an interesting description, you could set up an entity. You could have people that set certain rules and guidelines and go in and say, actually, we think that we can go in and make it safe without changing the law.
Well, that's right. As long as it's really clear that it's they, not the minister, who is responsible for the safety of the people who go in there, and that if anything happens to those people, they will face the full force of the law for taking a decision, and that's tested against whether they took all practical steps to keep them safe. And I can tell you, taking all the steps to meet a legal threshold for Pike River is a huge task.
Is that entity something that National had considered at any stage?
Well, there has to be a new entity because Solid Energy expire on the 31st of March.
But had National considered that as an alternative should you reform the government this time? Was it
Well,
something that was on the table?
Look, it's always open, right? You could have different.
But was it something that was actually being seriously thought about?
Well, as I said, you have to have a new entity because otherwise it reverts to DOC. And that entity is capable of making that decision.
You
The
should carry out.
confidentiality agreement that you've spoken about, was that a legal confidentiality document prepared by lawyers, or was that more of a sort of agreement amongst yourselves that, you know, for want of a better description, doesn't have any, is like a gentleman, that's the wrong word, but an agreement between
You mean a
each other?
politician's agreement?
A politics agreement on paper, or was it a legally binding confidentiality document? There are two differences.
I couldn't answer the question about legally binding, but it's a commitment you make in good faith, and as you know, we stick to that commitment.
Does the comment on Jacinda Ardern's visit to Australia on Sunday, what she should be trying to do with Melbourne Turnbull?
Look, I think she should just do what you would expect on a first visit, and that is establish a rapport. I don't think there should be an expectation that there's going to be some fundamental change in the relationship or the issues that have been argued back and forth. I would hope that she would thank Prime Minister Turnbull for the huge amount of work he did to open up the path to citizenship for those thousands of Kiwis who found themselves marooned with the Australian law changes. I think that would probably be a good way to get the relationship onto a good set, good basis.
Oh, I think that she has a policy to retaliate against imposing fees on New Zealand university students. Do you think that should be raised at that meeting?
Well, look, that's up to her what she raises. She's the one representing New Zealand. All I'd say about the policy is that in combination with their desire to cut international student numbers by 20 or 30%, polytechs and PTEs around the regions are now very concerned about their futures. There will be potentially thousands of job losses. And if they're going to retaliate with Australia as well, that'll make us even less attractive. I mean, international education is our fifth biggest industry. We have a government that has, as a policy, setting out to systematically cut back dramatically our fifth biggest export industry. And I visited SIT, my first speech as leader of the opposition. We've got a real sense of anxiety. This is Invercargill. It's been a successful institution. Too many people in Invercargill voted Labor, and it looks like they're going to pay for it because they're dependent on foreign students for their viability. And the government's actions will turn them into a non-viable institution, sacking staff and losing the accommodation and services around a town that really needs it.
You said he's spoken out in general about his idea taking over again.
I spoke to him about the election result, but it would not be appropriate for me to be speaking to him about the Prime Minister, certainly ahead of the Prime Minister visiting him, so I haven't done that.
You said in your preamble you wanted to represent people who are upset about the way the government was formed. Are you upset with not the result of the process of how the government was formed?
Well, we accept that it's NZ, New Zealand's version of MMP, and the government is legitimately formed. I mean, we prefer to be part of the government. I think it poses some challenges for the government because they didn't win the middle ground vote in the way that usually indicates changes in direction in New Zealand politics. And I'm sure that's going to put some pressure on them over the next 12 months.
So what were you indicating in your preamble? You're not spoken to advisors who will say this government is illegitimate.
No, we're not saying that at all. I mean, I spoke about that on the night. I thought in a way they made their position quite clear. So today we're pushing the button, not on relitigating government, we're pushing the button on opposition. And it's starting on opposition, because of the way the government was formed, with more seats than the governing coalition. It is a minority government, and we have no obligation to smooth its path. None whatsoever. And that's how we're going about the job of opposition. We'll be dominant in the parliament, and to the extent that that influences what happens in this country, we will use that dominance. Because we've got almost 1 in 2 New Zealanders who want to stop this government doing things that reduce the aspirations of New Zealanders.
Will you help them pass TPP legislation that say the Greens don't want it?
Well, that will depend on, and there's a lot of steps there, but we support the TPP, and the Prime Minister needs to come back from that meeting successful in TPP. They need to achieve success, and in a sense I don't really mind how they do it, but they do need to get that TPP because it would be good for New Zealand.
You separated out health and mental health. Is that a sign that the roles to become common, or that there needs to be more focus on mental health?
Oh, well, look, it's been a focus. Health is a large portfolio, and often it's broken up. We just into people doing different bits. In this case, Matt Ducey has particular expertise related to his professional training and experience, and it's an issue on which we've spent a great deal of time on policy making, and I would hope that in that capacity he'll probably start out having a better idea what to do than the government does.
And Labor have a number of priorities in mental health, including research and mental health commission, the investment of days, holding mental health environment. Do you support those moves?
But we'll probably support them, but they shouldn't miss this. You know, that I hope they're not starting as they mean to go on. That somehow the answer to any complex problem is set up a commission and an inquiry. Now, in this case, I was part of setting up the Mental Health Commission the first time round. Circumstances are a great deal more positive this time. Its outcome is predictable, but given the amount of discussion that's been about mental health, I hope they're not putting their feet up for 12 to 15, 18 months while all that happens before they get on with, for instance, implementing the policies we announced just a couple of months before the election, which is something they should do. It's clearly not a priority for them.
Well, that's how they are, and that's how, the first 100 days they've got quite an ambitious plan. Do you think...
Now, the ambitious plan is to set up a committee. That's the ambitious plan. You just use the example flowing from today. They've announced this tertiary education policy and a $50 increase in student allowances. Well, there's a whole lot of young people. Most mental health is evident, 3/4 of its incidence is evident before you're 25. There's a whole lot of young people who can't go to tertiary education because they're not well enough. And apparently the students will get $50 a week extra living costs, but if you happen to have, you don't happen to have a job and you can't go training because of your mental health status, apparently you're not worth a cent. So, that's why clearly tertiary education and getting check-out operators to pay more for lawyers is really important to them. Actually supporting young people with mental illness isn't they're going to have to wait for a commission. And whatever comes out of that.
In general, Labor has quite a lot of say they go to do in the first 100 days. Do you think it's achievable?
Oh, look, I haven't seen the whole list. All I know is that on the announcements they've made so far, they'll spend the next couple of years cleaning up the mess.
Just on how David Clark today said he's considering asking all the DHB chairs to submit a resignation letter and then replace those that aren't on the same wavelength as the new government. Maybe a reaction to that.
How could they possibly know what wavelength this government is on health? Other than spend more money, and I'm sure they'll all agree with that. But otherwise, what's the wavelength?
What sort of approach is that getting people to submit resignation letters? Is that standard for incoming governments?
No, it's a highly politicised approach which I had hoped this Labor government would not follow. In fact, it's probably the one time that it did happen before was health reforms in the 90s where we changed the institutional form completely. So it was, had to change the people. But I would really hope they are not going to run that kind of politicised test across every government agency. And here's why, because there's a whole lot of people in those government agencies who are focused not on politics but on getting the job done, and the current government would serve its own best interests by letting them get on and do the job. And sure, if they've got major objections or conflicts somewhere, they should do something about it, but not as a blanket approach. I'm extremely disappointed. I thought that Jacinda Ardern government would be different. It turns out it's just the same old Labor trying to do its brutal tactics on the public service.
Just regulation, that's not mental health, older young people who aren't going to university because they're not well enough. I mean, give me this comment. Is there a statistic about that?
Oh no, look, I'm just pointing out the contrast of priorities. While they say they've got all these priorities, clearly their top priority has been, Labor's top priority in this first 100 days is to spend $600 million that they're taking off truck drivers and checkout operators to make it cheaper for lawyers and accountants to get through their tertiary education. Everyone else has got to wait for a committee.
Doesn't it mean that all those truck drivers and checkout operators are
No, there's no evidence that that's the case. And no evidence that the cost was a big barrier.
What makes you think there are older young people that aren't going to university because they're not well enough?
The statistics that show how many that are on benefit and the information held by MSD and by the health system that show it.
But that doesn't separate people who don't want to go with people who can't, though, does it?
I'll just make a simple point. Raising the effectively the benefit level for students by $50 a week. And if you're not a student, you get no increase. That's a simple point. Okay, we can have a seminar on this at this rate.
To take a big question, in regards to what Anne said previously in the last few days, how likely is it, do you think, that Labor will be able to get this ISDS clause through to remove the ISDS condition and still get the across the line?
I don't know. That's up to them. All I know is they need to succeed. The benchmark is coming back with the TPP because that's where it was heading. They might come back with some series of further meetings that sort of fudge it, but the circumstances, we understand it, we didn't used to understand it because it could change, is that there's the opportunity to secure it, and they have our support to secure it because that would be good.
If Labor moved to raise youth benefits like $50 a week, would you vote for it?
Well, they won't because they can't afford to. That's the thing you've got to remember about how the numbers, I mean, the expensive promises are expensive. They've set parameters, so all the money they're going to be able to do for incomes will be done by the 1st of April. It'll be over. So if they haven't done it now, it's not going to happen. They'll repeal the tax package, implement a different version of Allen on 1st of April, and beyond that, they'll be scratching to have the cash just to run the government properly.
You've been opposition leader before quite a while. It was a while ago. What have you learned then that you're going to take the role now?
Well, this is remarkably different circumstances than 15 years ago. I mean, it's great to be here with this big group of people, with a minority government in the parliament, and the ability to influence their decisions so that they keep New Zealand on track. And they're going to need a lot of positive influence to stop them frittering it away.
Why were you so late today? Did someone split the dummy over the allocation, or why?
No, because I came down and I happened to leave the list back up there. I thought you'll be asking penetrating questions. You'll be asking penetrating questions about number 43, and so I better bring the piece of paper. Okay, I think we're about there, are we? Oh, just effective MP, ran a great youth program in his own electorate, so he's got a good grip on what works with young people, and just a good fit for police, and it will really be good at making sure the government does what it said it would do.
You don't think his former career as a tobacco lobbyist sends a message to you?
No, not at all. I mean, we've all got former careers.